He stood tall, cloaked in the golden mist of Thessalian dawn, a king atop a ridge. Below, the world bristled with movement, Roman movement. Spears shifting, boots pounding dirt like war drums muffled by fog. Philip V of Macedon narrowed his eyes. He had seen this before, or so he thought. But this was no Persian plain. These weren't the clumsy legions of Pyrrhus's day. Yet Philip, descendant of Alexander's legacy, saw them as echoes of the past. Beatable, predictable, ancient. He believed in his phalanx the way priests believe in scripture. But what if that faith was his doom? There's a term modern psychology might use: legacy complex. The desperate need not just to rule, but to become someone else's legend. Philip didn't want to be a great king. He wanted to be Alexander reborn. But legacies can be blinding, and fog, thick as memory, doesn't show you the new roads carved by new empires. A Roman scout named Publius told a centurion that day, "They hold their spears like statues, sir." The centurion only nodded. Good. Statues don't move fast. This wasn't bravado. It was strategy. Rome didn't charge blindly. They flexed. They flowed. They adapted. While Philip's men waited for the old dance of iron, Rome wrote a new rhythm beneath their boots. But Philip wasn't listening. He saw armor and thought of glory. He saw order and thought of victory. He didn't see evolution. Imagine leading 16,000 men into battle, believing the world still played by your rules, only to watch it rewrite itself in front of your dying friends. And yet, was it confidence or hallucination? Cynoscephalae, 197 BC. The ridgelines moaned with war. The fog began to break. One half of Philip's phalanx had engaged, the other, not yet. That hesitation cracked the shell. Rome surged, not like a flood, more like quicksilver, impossible to grip, lethal to underestimate. Flaminius, the Roman commander, ordered manipular units to exploit the slope. Flexibility defeated rigidity. Philip had brought a queen to a board that now only allowed knights. As bodies fell, so did illusions. Macedon's pride was shattered not by numbers, but by misunderstanding. Can a kingdom fall simply because its king didn't update his vision? A surviving Macedonian officer, bleeding and bitter, reportedly whispered to a Roman soldier as he surrendered, "You don't fight fair." The Roman smiled. That's why we're still standing. And somewhere in the broken lines of Philip's proud army, a new thought began to fester among the survivors. If Rome didn't play by the rules, what if there were no rules anymore? And more dangerously, what if that was the point? If you're enjoying this deep dive into history's turning points, make sure to subscribe and leave a like. It helps bring more stories like this to life. It was supposed to be unstoppable. 16 rows deep, sarissas, pikes longer than nightmares, angled like a sea of teeth. Uniform, imposing, immaculate. The Macedonian phalanx was the image of control, of discipline carved into flesh and iron. A wall of order pretending to be invincible. But here's the question history rarely asks. What if perfection is the most dangerous illusion of all? At Cynoscephalae, the terrain whispered betrayal. The hills, uneven, broken, muddy, weren't made for straight lines. They were made for chaos. And chaos favors the adaptive. A Roman tribune slipped on the wet grass just before impact. Instead of rising, he rolled, repositioned, and ordered his units sideways, not forward. His cohort split like a river bending around a stone. The phalanx didn't bend. It cracked. Imagine standing shoulder to shoulder, trusting the shield to your left more than your own instincts. Now imagine that shield is gone. Broken formation means broken purpose. And in a phalanx, that means death. Can a system designed for precision survive when the world becomes unpredictable? The Macedonian engine was magnificent, but like any machine, it failed without flexibility. John Boyd, centuries later, would define victory through adaptation. The ODA loop: observe, orient, decide, act. Rome didn't just act. They reacted faster and smarter. And in that loop, the phalanx was trapped, turning slower than thought. In 197 BC, The right wing of Philip's army was still descending when the left had already collapsed. The terrain made unity impossible. The formation that once conquered Persia became a cage. Perfection, but paralyzed. Pulso narrativo 2. Revelatio historica inesperata. A Roman soldier, later interviewed in the barracks at Corinth, reportedly said, "They looked like gods at a distance. But once we were inside their spears, they looked like statues begging to move." Perfection, it turns out, doesn't scream. It freezes. And what the Macedonians built as an ideal, the unbreakable front, was only perfect until it wasn't. Isn't that true of so many things we build to protect ourselves? A young Macedonian boy, just 17, clutched his broken sarissa as the Romans passed by. He didn't run, didn't speak. His formation had drilled courage into him, but offered no answer for collapse. He wept, quietly, as if permission to feel had to come from the officer who now lay dead. This wasn't just a defeat. It was a funeral for a philosophy. That discipline alone is enough. So the Romans didn't just outfight the phalanx. They exposed its flaw to the world. And in doing so, they asked a terrifying new question. What other empires had mistaken rigidity for strength? And who would be next to discover their perfect system was already obsolete? He had the numbers. He had the ground. He had the chance. But he blinked, like a general standing on a winning move and folding the map instead. In 168 BC, Perseus of Macedon stood at the cusp of possibility. The Romans weren't yet in full formation. His cavalry was poised, his phalanx rested. For a heartbeat, fate held its breath. But then nothing. No charge, no bold strike, just hesitation. The kind that kills without swinging a sword. What's more fatal in war? A reckless leap, or the failure to leap at all? A courier, barely older than a squire, ran breathless through Perseus's camp, holding an urgent message. The path was clear, the Romans exposed. The generals whispered yes. Perseus said, "Wait." The boy waited too. He never delivered another message again. Clausewitz called it the friction of war, the unpredictable fog between decision and action. But this wasn't fog. It was something deeper, fear pretending to be wisdom. Roman sources later marveled at Perseus's position. High ground, numerical superiority, and the momentum. Yet he chose retreat. Why? Some say prudence. Others call it psychological collapse. Like a heartbeat skipping not from exhaustion, but doubt. A king who outlived his courage. And here lies the trap. Perseus wasn't foolish. That's what made him dangerous. He played by the book. He studied Rome. He read the winds. But in the moment where boldness breaks empires, he froze. Have you ever held all the pieces and still couldn't move? When the Battle of Pydna finally erupted, it wasn't with glory. It was with fragmentation. Perseus's hesitation gave Rome time to organize and then unleash. The phalanx held briefly until the terrain betrayed it once more. This time, there would be no comeback. Perseus fled, not in battle, but in silence. He escaped under cover of night, leaving men behind. Legends say he discarded his royal mantle to blend in, a king dissolving into the crowd. The last Macedonian monarch didn't fall in war. He faded out of it. But his fall wasn't just personal, it was philosophical. Because his final act posed a question that echoed across generations. Can a ruler lose everything? Not because he fought too much, but because he didn't fight at all? And deeper still, how many leaders after him would learn that inaction is its own kind of betrayal? What do you think? Was Perseus cautious or cowardly? Drop your thoughts in the comments. And don't forget to subscribe for more battles that shaped civilizations. It wasn't a sword that conquered Greece. It was a speech. The Isthmian Games, 196 BC. Thousands filled the stadium, their eyes hungry for spectacle. And then, from the Roman envoy's platform, came a voice, not in Latin, but in perfect Greek, like thunder wrapped in olive branches. Titus Quinctius Flamininus raised his hand, not to demand tribute, but to offer something far more seductive: freedom. He declared the Greek city-states free from Macedonian control. No taxes, No garrisons, no masters. The crowd erupted. But freedom, when whispered by an outsider, can be more dangerous than chains. Was this diplomacy or a Trojan horse wrapped in marble? A Corinthian artisan named Diodorus wept at Flamininus's words. He had lost a brother to Macedon's forced levies. That day, he carved a new statue, a Roman eagle perched above a broken phalanx. The irony? He didn't notice the chain beneath the eagle's claw. Rome didn't just invade terrain. They invaded identity. Flamininus understood the Greeks weren't just proud. They were nostalgic. He didn't challenge their ego. He courted it. He timed the announcement to the climax of the games, when emotions surged. And unlike other conquerors, he didn't speak of domination. He spoke of restoration. The stage was Greek, but the script was Roman. Can a people be conquered by hearing what they've longed to believe? Within a year, temples bore his name. Cities renamed plazas after him. Rome hadn't just won the war. It had colonized the soul. Even when Roman legions later marched through those same streets, banners held high and boots heavy, many Greeks welcomed them because they no longer saw invaders. They saw liberators. A Spartan elder, once a fierce critic of Roman influence, was seen saluting a passing cohort. Asked why, he muttered, "They kept their word until they didn't." The tragedy? Greece wasn't defeated in battle. It surrendered in applause. Flamininus didn't break Greece's body. He rewired its mind. And as the echoes of freedom faded into orders barked in Latin, one truth lingered like the last note of a dirge. Can you truly be free if your idea of freedom was given to you by your conqueror? And worse, what happens when you start defending your own chains? Statues stood. Armies marched, but something had stopped moving. Not the phalanx, not the bronze, the mind. A war machine polished on the outside, but rusted from within. After Alexander's death, his successors inherited vast lands, vast armies, and a vision too sacred to question. They worshipped his image, imitated his battles, mimicked his speeches, but they forgot to do the one thing that made him dangerous. They stopped thinking. What's worse, losing a legacy or embalming it alive? General Antigonos, a lesser-known heir to the Diadochi, once halted an entire campaign because the omens didn't align with Alexander's past timings. He fought not the enemy, but a ghost. His soldiers didn't chant forward, they whispered myths. The Romans? They tested, adapted, broke rules, reinvented. In the early 2nd century BC, Roman training manuals had begun to include case studies. What worked, what failed, even reports from enemy formations. Meanwhile, Macedonian doctrine still opened with, as devised by Alexander. Imagine driving a chariot into a battlefield that now ran on steel and wheels. That's what the successors did, draped in silk, shouting ancient slogans, while Roman formations danced around them. They weren't kings. They were actors trapped in a role written by someone else. Hannibal studied Alexander and used his mind. The Macedonians studied him and copied his silhouette. That difference? Fatal. Can imitation become a form of defeat? At Pydna, 168 BC, one Macedonian commander insisted on forming the classic double envelopment flank. The terrain didn't allow it. His officer warned him. He did it anyway. The formation buckled. The officer died. So did the formation. Alexander wasn't a formula. He was curiosity weaponized, and his successors turned that curiosity into ritual. So while Rome forged new doctrines in the fire of adaptation, Macedon burned incense at the altar of a dead god. What happens when a civilization worships memory more than innovation? And worse, what if the greatest threat to a legacy is trying too hard to preserve it? If this perspective surprised you, hit the like button and share your opinion below. Do you think legacy helps or destroys leaders? Subscribe to follow the rest of this series. They had a choice: Rome or Macedon, future or past, iron or marble, and they chose nostalgia, like sailors clinging to an anchor during a rising tide. The Greek city-states, fractured, proud, ancient, looked at Rome and didn't see opportunity. They saw a mirror that didn't reflect their myths. Macedon, for all its tyranny, still felt Greek, still spoke in Homeric tones. And so, many polis sided with the familiar shadow. But when does loyalty become self-destruction? In 171 BC, a delegation from Athens met in secret, debating whether to support Rome's intervention in Macedon. A young philosopher named Iason urged neutrality, said Rome was too alien, too hungry. His father, a veteran of the wars, spat on the ground. Better a Greek tyrant than a Roman benefactor, he said. Athens abstained. Months later, Roman troops marched through its gates anyway. The Greeks feared Roman conquest because they misunderstood Roman intent. Rome wasn't just a war machine. It was a sponge, absorbing culture, repurposing tradition, and feeding on division. By the time of the Third Macedonian War, dozens of polis had either directly supported Perseus or offered logistical aid. Why? Not because of strategy, but memory. They remembered Macedon's dominance, but forgot its decline. They fought like statues trying to breathe again. Can a civilization collapse by clinging too tightly to who it used to be? Rome didn't crush the city-states with malice. It simply outmaneuvered them, militarily, diplomatically, psychologically. And as Greek blood-soaked fields like Callinicus and Pydna, something deeper faded. Not just sovereignty, but cultural certainty. Delphi, once the beating heart of Greek prophecy, saw fewer pilgrims that year. A Roman consul passed its gates and paused. Still waiting for Apollo, he joked to his translator. The priest answered, "No, just try to hear him over the Latin." This wasn't just defeat. It was foreclosure, on identity, on memory, on a shared myth of greatness. So the Greeks didn't just back the wrong side militarily. They bet their soul on a ghost. Can a people die, not from invasion, but from choosing the past over the possible? And if so, what survives when the heart of a civilization chooses to stop beating? It ended not with a roar, but a silence no army could break. Pydna, 168 BC, the phalanx shattered, the ground soaked with generations of pride, and with it, something deeper collapsed. Not just a kingdom, not just a war, but an identity, a civilization imploding like a fortress built on echo. What remains of an empire when it forgets how to exist without power? A Macedonian boy, barely 12, wandered the field after the battle, searching for his father. He stepped over broken spears, crushed helms, and the shattered crest of a royal standard. What he found wasn't a body, but a discarded bronze breastplate, still warm. He put it on. It hung like a question he couldn't yet ask. Rome didn't just conquer Macedon, it deleted its future. The royal line was extinguished, nobility arrested, statues pulled down, not to be replaced, but left absent like gaps in a memory. And in that absence, shame took root. Roman records note that after the battle, more Macedonian soldiers surrendered than fled. Not because they couldn't run, but because they didn't see where else to go. The silence after Pydna wasn't peaceful. It was hollow, like the echo of a song no one remembered how to finish. Can a culture survive if its soul was built only for conquest? In Amphipolis, a former officer tried to rally veterans to resist Roman rule. No one came. Instead, they sent him a sealed jar of wine. Inside was a note. Let it go. The gods have. And just like that, Macedon, the name, the myth, the fire, became a memory carved in someone else's marble. But maybe this wasn't just Macedon's end. Maybe it was a mirror. Because if an empire born of fire can die of silence, what does that say about the empires we build today? And deeper still, when pride becomes a prison, do we even notice the bars before it's too late? If you found this journey through Macedon's fall thought-provoking, like the video and share it with others who love history. And of course, subscribe because more untold stories are coming.